Thank you so much for listening to Project Censored Radio. We're very excited to be joined today by Jessica Pinckney, who is the Executive Director of Access Reproductive Justice, a reproductive justice organization funding abortion and other reproductive health care. Access removes barriers and builds the power of Californians to achieve reproductive justice. Jessica, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
So I wanted to invite you on because by this point, I'm sure most, if not all of our listeners are aware that on May 2nd, a draft from Supreme Court Justice Samuel A. Alito Jr. was leaked, detailing the decision to overturn the 1973 Roe v. Wade decision, which protects right to abortion in the first trimester. Now, first off, I'd like to highlight kind of the tattered state of Roe v. Wade as it stands as of today. And Jessica, you're in California, and California, I mean, I lived there for 10 years, and then I've spent a lot of time outside of it. And California is considered to be the most progressive of the states in the country. And yet, of course, access and the work that you all do exists in order to remove barriers to reproductive health care that obviously must exist in California. Can you talk about some of those barriers and the current state of abortion access right now in California?
Absolutely. So Access Reproductive Justice has been in existence since 1993, which is almost 30 years. And I think that's a really important to lift up because it indicates that there have always been barriers to accessing abortion care here in California, even though we are a reproductive freedom state and one of the more progressive states throughout the country. But for those who haven't lived in California, it's a massive state. It could take you the better part of a day to drive from, the tip of Northern California to the tip of Southern California. And there are over 40% of California counties that have no abortion providers or clinics whatsoever. So even in California, where there are a multitude of providers and clinics who can support with abortion, you might have to drive 3 or 4 hours or more if you live in a rural area to access care. So that's one barrier folks face. Another is you may be having a multiple day procedure and you may be 4 or 5 hours away from home. So people need support with lodging and hotels to be able to stay overnight away from home. We're lucky in California that California's Medi-Cal does cover abortion for folks, but sometimes copays and deductibles are really a barrier for people on private insurance. We are lucky to have just passed SB 245 here in California, which eliminates copays and deductibles for abortion on California's private insurance plans, and that will go into effect in 2023. But sometimes people call us and have a $2,000 deductible, and it's honestly cheaper for them to have their abortion out of pocket than to pay through their insurance. So those are just a few of the issues that people have. We have young folks who are on their parents' insurance plans, don't want their parents to find out they're having an abortion. We have undocumented folks who are navigating various government systems and also concerned about potentially, being forced to leave the country because they're trying to have an abortion. We have folks who have unstable housing and need stable housing to be able to even have a medication abortion at home. So there are a lot of barriers, even in a progressive state like California. And so we can only imagine then what the barriers look like in the least progressive, most restrictive spots throughout the country.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because the next question is really about zooming out, because if the court sticks with this decision, then it would be basically leaving it up to states to decide. And so I'm curious how you feel like that will affect or change the work that you do. And I'm wondering, because obviously Abortion Networks, I found you through a national kind of a national collective of abortion funds. And so I'm curious how you think this might affect the way that reproductive health care organizations work across state lines. Do you think that'll happen more often, or how do you see this shifting your work?
So, Access Reproductive Justice has always supported people coming from out of state to access care. That need has certainly grown over the last few years, and we, of course, anticipate that it will grow even more if and when the Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade. We always work with other abortion funds across the country. We are part of the National Network of Abortion Funds, which is a network of about 80 abortion funds and practical support organizations all across the country. So for example, when SB 8 went into effect in Texas, we were already in conversation with the 10 abortion funds that are in Texas to make sure that we could collaborate in supporting people coming from Texas to California to access care. And that can look like the Texas Abortion Fund paying for the airfare and Access Reproductive Justice paying towards the procedure itself. It can really look a lot of different ways. So I think, honestly, abortion funds were really built for this moment. We know how to support people in coordinating their abortion care. We know how to work with clinics, how to work with other abortion funds, how to work with abortion doulas and other support folks to make sure that people can adequately get care. But we absolutely anticipate that there will be a huge influx of people who will be coming from out of state to California. And we here in California are doing everything possible to be ready for that moment. We've been working through the Future of Abortion Council that was put in place by the governor last fall to move 13 bills through the state legislature that would improve abortion access in California. And that covers everything from ensuring that there are legal protections in place for providers, for patients, for people who support providers and patients, to ensuring that there's increased funding to support paying for abortions themselves, as well as the practical support work that Access Reproductive Justice really focuses on. There's legislation to ensure that there can be funding for reproductive justice organizations who provide culturally sensitive and congruent education to their communities. And there's work through that legislation also to ensure that we increase the provider workforce in California. So we're very much anticipating that there will be a number of changes in the dynamic, but we're doing everything possible to prepare.
Yeah, that sounds amazing, and I'm glad that you are because I grew up partially in North Carolina, and I'm already hearing horror stories of people trying to figure out what they're going to do. Abortion providers and people who work on this issue, what they're going to do if and when that hammer does fall. And with respect to that, I think it's also important, I think I don't know if there's a correlation here, but, the fact that Access started in 1993, there was actually back in 1993, a bill that was put forward, the Freedom of Choice Act, that basically would have codified Roe versus Wade into law. And this highlights the issue that, any time since Roe v. Wade was passed, this could have been codified into law. And it hasn't been. And, when you bring this up with regards to why Democrats didn't at a time when they controlled both houses of Congress and the White House, it's kind of like because then you guys wouldn't keep voting for us, maybe. So it's like this, it's really frustrating and infuriating to realize that we might not be in this situation if that act in 1993 had moved forward. So I'm curious, first of all, if there's a correlation between the founding of Access, but also how you feel people can kind of push this issue legislatively, knowing that, it's been stuck for so long, and the Dems don't really seem that interested in pushing it forward, not on a federal level anyway.
Yeah, definitely not on a federal level. No, I'm not aware of any correlation with Access's founding in 1993 and that particular piece of legislation. It doesn't mean that there isn't a correlation. It's just not something I'm aware of kind of in our history. But I think it's really unfortunate that the leaked draft or SCOTUS draft really has kind of drawn people to attention, I think, in a way that the reproductive health rights and justice community have been calling for a long time. This is not a new issue. Even in 1973, when Roe v. Wade became the law of the land, we know that a right is only a right if you can actually access it. So for many, Roe v. Wade has been non-existent for years, if not decades. And we know that that's the case for the majority of the country already. And so I think what this moment really brings up for me is, this isn't a new problem, and it's really empowering to see people coming to the movement and trying to understand the work that is being done and trying to plug in to where and how they can help. But I think it's also really important to understand this is work that has been being done for decades, that has been predominantly led by Black and Brown communities, by LGBTQ leaders. And it really feels like that there, particularly on the legislative end at the federal level, that we have been ignored, and that there has been a real dismissal of conversations around abortion and abortion access because they're quote unquote controversial. But the thing about it is abortion is healthcare. It's plain and simple. And so, the politicization of something that has no business being politicized is really frustrating, I think, now and always. But, I know there are advocates and activists all across this country that have been doing the work and will continue to do the work to make sure that people can get the care they need no matter what. And I think it's just really imperative. I'm really thrilled to see here in California the way state legislators, the governor, the attorney general have stepped up in this moment. And I hope that it sets an example for federal legislators, for other state legislators, to really think through how we can support work that has been being done for quite some time to make sure that we're destigmatizing abortion and making it as truly accessible as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And something you said highlighted yet another snare in this whole scenario is at the same time as folks are pushing for reproductive health care, there's a push for universal health care, which, as you pointed out, includes reproductive health care. But hypothetically, let's say that Roe v. Wade is overturned and that states get to decide, but then there's a universal health care that passes down the road. How would that then affect people's ability to access abortion? And it just really, I think it also really highlights like how important, if we're talking about a federal decision, like how important it is to have that accessible wherever you are, because of course, people will also move. And so like, let's say I lived in California, then I moved to North Carolina. All of a sudden I don't have reproductive rights because I changed my geography. I mean, it's really absurd. And with that, I kind of also wanted to ask, since you're an expert with this, people who are really scared, looking at the potential for the coming months, like what are some options for people who might need reproductive health care and might just be having to break the law or not sure what to do in the case of needing help?
Sure. I mean, I think it's really important to note as of right now, the end of May, abortion is still legal across the country. So if you have an appointment already, if you're trying to make an appointment, go forth. Of course, limitations in places like Texas, we're seeing a likelihood of a complete ban in Oklahoma. But still, call your local clinic to try and make an appointment, call your local abortion fund if you need support accessing care. And honestly, that's the advice I'm going to have for folks if and when Roe v. Wade is overturned and, half of states ban or outright ban or close to outright ban abortion. Still, call your clinics, call your local abortion funds. We will be, everyone will be doing the work to try and get people connected to the care they need. So we already work with Texas clinics who will direct folks to California clinics when necessary. And we just anticipate that will continue. So, folks should not fear. Yes, there will likely be increased barriers to you accessing your abortion, but there are a number of states that have quickly enacted legislation and funding to make sure that we can help get people from one place to another as efficiently and as quickly as possible. So there's certainly a tough road ahead. I don't want to, sugarcoat that in any way, shape, or form, but abortion funds, clinics, providers are as prepared for this moment as we possibly can be. And I think the beautiful thing about people who work in this space is this is a very personal issue for many of us. And we will do everything in our power to make sure that people can get the support that they need, no matter what.
Yeah, thank you for voicing that. And also, as part of this this segment that we're doing on Project Censored, I too am highlighting that I had an abortion in California, and I'm very glad that I was able to access it. I feel very privileged. It wasn't cheap, but it was safe. And I, like so many others, would have gotten it no matter what. And so I think that that's another thing that that is often highlighted, but people don't hear it enough. I think that you're never going to stop people from getting an abortion. You're only going to stop them from getting a safe one.
I mean, yes, I agree. Like, you're never going to stop people from getting an abortion, but I think it's important to know things look a lot different than they did pre-1973. Folks can have safe abortions in their homes with medication abortion. We know that many Black, Brown, Indigenous communities have been self-managing their abortions for decades, if not centuries. And so I think it's also really important to reflect on where we've come as a society in terms of our technologies and our innovation. Because yes, people will figure out how to have their abortion. So if that means medication abortion at home, if that means getting pills from other countries, like there are a lot of things that folks could potentially and will potentially do. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that and note that, the decisions that people make about their bodies and their families and their communities are their decisions to make. And, I certainly hope that if Roe v. Wade is overturned as we expect it to be, while we will see a huge loss of abortion access across the country, we will also see the way things have changed in the last 60 years or 50 or 60 years. That does make abortion more accessible within the confines of your home or your community as well.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that. That's really important. And also, of course, points out that when the system blocks our ability to thrive or even survive, then communities have and always will band together and figure out ways to keep themselves safe. And so finally, I just wanted to ask this question because I partially also grew up in Sweden, where there's really zero stigma about abortions or sex or any of that. And in fact, people who are under age can get an abortion without their parents knowing about it. There's a lot of safety and support around that issue. And so I'm curious, like, how do you feel as a professional? How do you feel that there are ways that communities can work to get rid of this stigma around abortion and really just talk about it as it is, like a part of healthcare?
What an interesting upbringing. um, yes, I access reproductive justice is a huge proponent of folks saying the word abortion, sharing their abortion stories. And we really try to support people to do that in a way that feels meaningful for them and not exploitive in any way. But I think it's really important for people to have these conversations within their own families and communities. The founder of We Testify, Renee Bracy Sherman, kind of created this saying, everybody loves somebody who's had an abortion. And it's so true. Everybody loves somebody who's had an abortion, whether you know it or not, right? 1 in 4 pregnant folks will have an abortion in their lifetime. So chances are, somebody. And I think I've seen it up close and personal, like how someone sharing their story with a close family member or a friend, or, someone, well respected in their life, can change opinions around abortion. I think for so many, it feels like it's this far off concept, particularly if you can't, or, if you are identify as someone who can't get pregnant, that, this is uncommon or abnormal in some way, and it's really not. And I think the more people share their stories, share their experiences, are unafraid and unabashed in talking about abortion, that's the really important work to destigmatize it. I think it's also really important for folks who have not had an abortion, to just listen and to understand that everybody's experiences are different. And just because this is a decision you would have made differently, or you don't understand how someone ended up in this situation, or whatever the case may be, it's really important for us to understand that other folks, just like we do, have the ability to make determinations about themselves and their bodies, and how, if, when, and how they expand their families. And so I think just the more human compassion we have for other people, whether we know them or not, and an innate trust in people to make the decisions that are best for themselves, will bring us a long way in reducing abortion stigma.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Is there anything that you'd like to add, that I might have missed?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. What's the best way for folks to follow your work or to support like a local abortion fund that might be in their area?
Yeah, so if you're in California, I strongly encourage you to go to accessrj.org. You can donate to our organization. It's a huge help in making sure that funds get into the hands of people who need transportation, lodging, childcare, or support paying for their abortion itself. You can also learn about volunteer opportunities. Many abortion funds and practical support organizations have cohorts of volunteers who drive people to appointments, house people in their homes, provide financial support. So strongly encourage you to go to Access RJ if you're in California, or are interested in supporting work in California. And if you want to look up the local abortion fund in your state or community, you can go to abortionfunds.org. There's a list of all of the abortion funds that are part of the national network there, and you can learn more ways to get involved with your local abortion fund as well.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.